Welcome back to the Aromatic Show. My name is Neeb, your host and co-host Rishi. What's good, Rishi? How are you, bro?
Good, man. How are you doing? How's everyone
I'm
doing?
good.
Are you like? Let's just see. I mean, we got a bunch of people are loving the podcast right now. So
That's what's up, man. That's what's up, and we're gonna give him even more reason to love it because we're gonna be talking about something I think is very, very interesting, and I think there's a lot of like opinionated or even misconceptions about the category of, or I should say,
hmm
the whole compliments, man. It's just human nature. Like, who the fuck doesn't like to be complimented? And I don't
that's
care
true.
what anybody says. People are like, oh, I wear a fragrance for me. Yeah, of course you wear a fragrance for you. But
But it does
compliments
feel
can,
nice when you get complimented.
huh? It changes your entire experience, bro. I mean, honest
Exactly.
to God, like, I feel the same way. Like, I wear fragrance for myself, but I'd be lying to say that there wasn't a fragrance that I didn't really care too much for, that I didn't fall in love with by just the compliments. What about you, man? What are like, and the most memorable experiences with fragrance, generally speaking, aside from like the whole, memories, etc., is compliments.
That's true. That's true. And
Yeah.
because and it also creates like a specific memory for you. Like the scent profile is great. You like the fragrance and everything. But then if someone tells you that you smell good and it smells nice and they ask you, oh, this smells good, what are you wearing? That actually,
Yeah.
it stays with you and it stays with near your memory. Okay, someone, told me that this smells good. Maybe I should wear it again. And it boosts your confidence. At least it did it for me. Last time I wore the fragrance that I was telling you about. And we talked about how that's not a very basic scent profile. It's completely different.
What did you
And
wear
that's
exactly?
uh, Narciso Rodriguez Blue Noir Parfum.
Blue Noir Parfum. Yeah, yeah,
hmm
yeah. So for those of you who don't
And
know, Narciso Rodriguez Blue Noir Parfum has like the note of iris, cypress. We were talking about this fragrance a while ago with cardamom in the last podcast, I think, and it has like this vibe that'll remind you of like opening a makeup bag. And I know that sounds unusual and weird, but then we started talking about like unusual and weird scent profiles that actually get more attention than norm.
mhm.
But yeah, that's a reference for
It
people who don't
smells
know.
nice,
So
man. I love it. I love that
yeah,
makeup vibe. Honestly, I love the whole iris. I love the whole. It's very,
yeah,
it's
it's very
subjective, but
nice.
like I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, it really does go to the whole unusual and getting compliments, and that in itself changes an experience. Like, what's the whole point of like wearing fragrance, right? Like, number one, you'll say it's for yourself. Yes, I agree. But it's an accessory. It's something you wear to signify like either your mood, your personality, your characteristic. And
Hundred
if
percent. Yeah.
you get certain level of validation, which human nature, like you could say, anybody could say whatever the fudge they want about how like I don't need validation. Okay, yeah, that's true. But when you get it, especially randomly, it validates that sense of like just your aura, your character, and it does give you validation, and it does matter. It does matter. Like none of us are. This is how we're created. Like we do like validation, and since the beginning of time, like how are we
Yeah.
validated amongst our parents and families, and so fragrance in itself is like, dude, I wore the proper kicks. Dude, nice shoes. Yeah, hell yeah. Like it is what it is. What's up, Fry? So yeah, compliments definitely make a difference. And I noticed that a lot of people then start to ask like what gets compliments? Like is it the same for everybody? And is it like are there specific scent profiles? Like I'll watch a lot of videos, bro, and I'm sure you've seen like or before making content it was like high compliment factor fragrances or compliment worthy fragrances, you know? Things
Yeah.
like that. Like what in your opinion makes a compliment worthy fragrance? Because I have a couple of through experience of ideas and opinions on as to like fragrances that get compliments in different settings and personalities.
It's true. That's something that I would like to know as well. Is there a specific scent profile? I haven't had a lot of experience with fragrance and getting complimented because I just got into
Well,
fragrance.
what's
I
your
used to be like
opinion?
a
What's
yeah.
your opinion?
I feel I feel it's just maybe it's kind of subjective once again, right? I like some kind of a fragrance. I like some kind of a scent profile. And for example, if I'm meeting a friend and if they also like the same thing, maybe they compliment me that it smells good. I think it's
Yeah.
subjective that the
Okay,
other
so you're
person
you're
who's
it's
complimenting you
simple.
also has to
Yeah.
understand, right?
Okay,
Or
okay,
maybe there
got
are
it. So
some
you
mass
just think
appealing
if something just
fragrances that
smells good, it's compliment worthy. But what
I
do you
think
think
so, and I
makes
think it's very
one
subjective as well.
very subjective? Okay, yes, yes, yes. So like for instance, just this more compliment worthy than this, in your opinion, like is there any specific idea or is it just depends on what the person that complimented you likes, right? And I would say you're right. Like that's
I think
it's
according to me,
simple.
yeah.
No, it's not just according to you. It is simple. It's simple. Like if somebody likes something, they're going to compliment it. But I feel like there are a certain class and levels of fragrance that can also um, increase that compliment factor. So there is a way to increase your compliment factor. So we're not talking about like what gets compliments. No, but how can you increase it? How can you increase your the compliments factor? And more so than just in the fragrance. And it starts even before the fragrance, which a lot of people, for example, like I get a lot of compliments, bro. I swear to God, I get a lot of compliments. And you see like my B-roll, my content. Sometimes I'll like do random stuff that don't make the cut. They don't make it into the videos because it's either low quality or just doesn't like, what's the point? Okay. Like somebody came up and asked or said that smells good. We don't always use it. But what works for me, and I've noticed there's a lot that goes into compliments, more so than just the fragrance itself. It
Yeah,
starts
100%.
much,
Yeah.
yes, bro. And it's gonna sound cliche, like it's yourself first. It's yourself first, bro. Like hygiene, and not just in the actual hygiene, but if you look like you're hygienic, if you're hygienic but you don't look it, like, bro, you're not gonna get complimented. Like,
True.
if personality, aura, vibe. If I'm walking around with my hat like this, obviously I'm a lot more presentable and more approachable than if I'm walking down like this. And there are different vibes that sometimes I'll go to the gym looking like this. I don't want anybody to look at me. I'm just here to work out. On days like that, I've never been approached, period. On days where I'm wearing my hat up or I'm wearing my hat back, I'll be much likely and more likely to get approached and looked at and spoken to. And that's generally speaking what as he fixes his hair. Yeah,
See,
bro, I wouldn't
it's
compliment
just,
you
yeah.
right now. But it's true. It's true. It's appeal, right? And so a lot of these
Yeah.
people like go and think that I'm gonna get this water and alcohol and I'm gonna get compliments and attention. For those
Yeah.
people, that type of mentality and thinking, I'm sorry, bro, like you can't help. Like you
You
gotta
have to be
start,
approachable at least.
yeah,
Like you have
and
to
this,
seem that, that you're
for a
the
majority
aura and
or
everything that you talked about. Yeah.
exactly. And so for a high population, like this is common knowledge, but there are a lot of people that don't get that. That don't get that. Like, I'm gonna spray this fragrance. I didn't get compliments. Bro, look in the mirror, man. Bro, do you even smile when somebody bro, in different states, cultures are different too. Like I live in Michigan, right? Where like you don't like smile at each other. It's just not the way it works. Like it's just different vibes, a different culture. So whenever I
Hmm.
travel to like Florida, North Carolina, the South, or whatever, it's completely different. Or whenever I travel to a region where it's not normal for people to, like Middle East sometimes, it's not normal for a family to come and compliment you. Like they've got their women. It's just different cultures and different vibes. But it starts with personality. Personality first, hygiene second. And then after that, we can start to get more intricate into details. There's a lot more that goes into fragrance and what really captures compliments and attention because there are different styles of fragrance, right? There's the clean, there's the fresh, and clean and fresh, generally speaking, works for like the masses, right? Let's talk about the compliment factors aside from the basic shit of like, you got to wear something that smells good, obviously. But what's defined as good, and where is that threshold of like, okay, bro, you're wearing something that's not compliment worthy? And there are a lot of like socially agreed on things, right? Or scents that are related to, I think we can say, socially accepted, things that are good and not. And aside from the fact, obviously, that it's got to be fragrance that smells good, and we can argue and sit here and talk about like what is actually that smells good. No, we're gonna dodge that, right? There's already a common ground where like we can all agree what smells good. A pile of shit doesn't smell good. It might to like, some people, but obviously not. So aside from the fact of wearing something that's good and fresh, you're more likely going to get compliments. Freshies get compliments because they work, because it smells like what? It smells like the first topic we talked about, hygiene. So a man, for instance, who smells like a shower, for instance, if I were holding YSL EDP, is more likely to
Yeah.
get compliments because it indicates a man who takes care of himself. And ultimately, it really comes down to indication of like health, indication of health. And that's generally speaking what we identify as attraction. Like if we go to like the chemical basis, or if we talk about like just man and women and attraction and what is attractive, etc., from a means of like survival and stuff, it's usually like a person who's healthy, for mating and for longevity. And so when you think of hygiene, when you think of like cleanliness and fragrance and stuff, this is something that emphasizes on that. If we're talking about fresh scents, right? So a man, for instance, who wears a freshie that smells like a shower will emphasize on the fact that he's clean, he's healthy, he's presentable, he's etc.
Yeah.
He
At least
has
he
the
takes
means
care
to clean
of
himself.
himself. Yeah.
Exactly. I don't have to go and smell shit and whatever. But a person who looks like they didn't shower and still wears this facade of shower, you already lost at the initial the first step, which is going to be the visual aspect, which is right away you identify whether or not they're clean. And as soon as that's dropped, now you've already significantly dropped your compliment factor in yourself. So I would personally say that the compliment factor in regards to fragrance starts with you first. Like high compliment factor fragrances can only increase that percentage of likelihood of getting compliments. So with that being said, that's why it's so crucial. So I don't care what fragrance you have. One of the biggest factors of compliment factors in itself is you first.
Yeah.
I don't care. This could be one of the most complimented fragrances of all time, and you go buy it, but you look like you didn't wash your ass. Forget about it. I don't care how compliment worthy it is. And then you have people who like have the audacity to, because they're not real with themselves sometimes, and come back and be like, didn't give me a single compliment. Like, first off, have realistic expectations. Number one, the fact that it has high compliment factor for me, or high compliment factor, let's say, should come with why, right? But if it's my most complimented, doesn't necessarily mean it's yours. And it goes back to what you said initially, Rishi, which is it's subjective to an extent. But there is an objective reality to it as well. Go ahead.
True. So like if you think about fragrances, it's obviously subjective in some manner, but there's obviously more to that, right?
Of course.
And if you can look at it basically in two ways. So basically they're complimenting you because they love the scent, or they're complimenting you, and they're complimenting you because it's the person who's wearing it.
Yes. So there are two factors to the compliments, and you hit them both on the head. And you can dissect each one of those. So if we dissect this into two, right? Compliment factors, number one, starting in you. We've already dissected that. Hygiene, cleanliness, and why, we've also already dissected that. Yeah. It's psychological. Like, it's just the way that we're created, right? The laws of attraction, the science of attraction, which I've studied, and psychology and all this stuff. And I am a medical profession as well. And why we find certain scents to be a turnoff and not. Like, for instance, the reason why, right? Like, we all know that blood doesn't smell good or shit doesn't smell good, but do we know why? A lot of people don't know why. It's not because the actual scent in itself is like smells bad. Well, to us it might, right? Objectively. But why? It's because our brains, or our receptors in our brains, identify this as something harmful, identify it as waste. And therefore the brain creates this relation of, oh, stay away. But you notice the saying of like, your own shit don't stink, is because your brain already knows it's yours. And so, for example, like a person who doesn't shower, eventually they stick in their own stink and they're like, I don't smell bad, but they don't know because their brain and those signals have turned it off. And it also is related to like going anosmic or nose blind. Like, for instance, a lot of saffron fragrances or Baccarat Rouge is notorious for going nose blind. But the reason is because the brain, gets this fatigue of recognizing the same consistent smell and turns it off because it no longer finds it harmful. So generally speaking, it comes down to like biochemical and biological reactions as to why something smells good or smells bad. And that's why freshies smell really good, and they're generally accepted by a lot of people. Now, it starts to get subjective when we start to jump into fragrances that have a little bit more than that, where they have maybe a food aspect, a resin aspect, a spice aspect. And this is where it becomes a lot more subjective. But I think for the masses and for a lot of people, the freshie realm is generally speaking one of the easiest for people to get into, but also probably one of the highest compliment factors. But and then there are like other specific realms. So we will say that, right? So the starting factor is going to be ourselves, and that's going to be the hygiene, which we prefaced already exactly why. The second thing is going to be personality.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
It all comes down to if you're approachable or not, right? It all comes down to who you
personality. Exactly. And that's personality. Like the first the first segment of like receiving the compliment is the eyes. The eyes are attracted or direct towards you, and it's either attracted or not. And if it's not, immediately it's dropped right there. There's no compliment. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. But let's say, for instance, they're attracted to you for like, let's say you're not a bad looking person. You don't have to be the best looking person to get a compliment, but it does definitely help, obviously, the way you look. But honestly, the way you look can also come down to how much care you take of yourself. And not all of us have the same opportunities as others because it costs time, energy, and money to take care of yourself. And given certain opportunities that people don't have, maybe time, money, or energy, they might not be able to look a certain way. But at the very least, the hygiene segment is something that everybody can do. For example, I buy protein, I work out, I have the time to go to the gym every day. Not many people have that. Some people have kids. Some people have that they have to tend to. Some people work 9 to 5, 7 days a week. Some people, and for that reason, it's understandable. But rather, this is the reality of it, though. And so, at the very least, the hygienic part should be there. And hygiene doesn't just mean washing yourself. Clean cut, clean groomed, having a sense of like, it is what it is. It's also for us culturally and religiously, like it's a common practice to have that way. So anyways, so that starts there. And then the second will be the approachability, like you said, the personality, right? If you're a person who's looking all grumpy and angry and sad, why would I want to approach you? To bring that energy. We're all energy, right? We're floating energy and we all transfer energy. If you look like a grump, I don't want that transfer of energy. You can keep that there because it's real. It's real. Transfers of energy are real. Otherwise, we wouldn't have protons, electrons, neutrons, etc. They do transfer, and they do. But if you're radiating and it looks like you're positive and you're full of like protons and whatever, okay, you know what? This motherfucker looks good. And then also, the guy looks like he's chill. And then you start walking towards them, or you're walking past them. And then on top of that, damn, this motherfucker smells good.
Yeah.
And now you turn around and you're like, there's an attention grabbing factor, which I would say compliment and attention grabbing is two separate. But he smells good. So if it wasn't that attention grabbing, I might not turn my face. But if he smelled good, I'll just be like, that guy smells good. Now it's up to me. Am I comfortable? See, there's that other factor is the outside person. So you guys, like, it has to be like this perfect scenario, but you can set it up to be easy. So getting compliments is not like definitive. Like a person who gives you the compliment has to feel like they're not vulnerable, because believe it or not, sometimes giving a compliment from a person puts them in a place of vulnerability. And if I live in a region or an area where it's a culture where you don't place yourself vulnerable, or like, like for example, if I'm walking in a hood, and I'm not gonna say any specific city, I'm gonna be, like on guard, on toe. Like this person can approach and look a certain way and be like smiling and walk past me. I might still not slip, because that moment of vulnerability will place me out of my element, out of my zone. So this is a whole nother factor this guy's not even thinking about, but it is a factor, right? Versus being in a controlled environment setting, whatever, this guy passed me. Yo, bro, you smell really good, man. What are you wearing? Or even me wanting to be interested in fragrance. I'm like, I'm not interested in fragrance. Whatever, bro. Yeah, you smell good. Cool. I didn't even think about it. Then the other portion would be attention grabbing fragrances. Compliment factors or fragrances that have the factor high because it's attention grabbing in a different way. And that's the perfect way to summarize it, in a different way. So maybe having some elements of cleanliness, but done in a completely unusual way. Whereas like you got the checkpoints, right? Visually, check. Approachability, check. And now this person, the same scenario, is walking past. Oh, he smells good, but wait, what the fuck is that? You turn around and then you process it in like milliseconds. Oh, but it smells good. It can go two different ways. Unusual and good. It could be like, what? Wow, dude, you smell good. And just like that quick. Or it can go another way where it's like, wait, what? Oh, fuck, that smells bad. And you just keep walking. And so there are two different aspects of that. And it can really, that's where like subjective comes. In that millisecond that it takes that person to turn their head and determine. If I'm a person like me, for instance, who likes incense and stuff, let's place this person with Interlude Man, Black Iris. And this is a fragrance that's very smoky, incensey, churchy, with iris. I'm going to turn and be like, wait, what? Be like, that actually smells really good. Bro, you smell like Ramadan. You smell like Holy Temple. You smell good. I'll say somebody who's into freshies, he's gonna be like, wait, what? All those checks, but then he's gonna be like, oh, it smells like a barbecue. And he's gonna walk away. You feel me? So,
Yeah.
but what it did accomplish is that head turning factor, is the compliment factor. Not necessarily, I would say that compliment factor is very testy to use. And head turning factor is probably a more accurate way to say, right? Because nobody can tell you definitively. Well, actually, there is a way. If it leans more towards a fresh and socially acceptable, you would say the compliment factor is high. If it leans towards it just getting attention, you would say that it's more head turning, right? And so in that sense, it's very subjective. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even after even talking about the head turning thing, right? For the person to even, gauge that, okay, this smells good, even if someone's walking past you or you walk past them, and okay, this smells good, you turn around, and for that millisecond, it also comes down to the person who's gonna compliment you or not.
100% at that portion, it's
Yeah.
that person. It's subjective to the person
Exactly.
smelling you.
Yeah.
You should stay true to what you like, but just identify and recognize that this is unusual. It's going to get attention, but what kind? Well, I want to stay true to my taste. Let's say, for instance, this is where you start to pick the other aspect of the whole compliment factor, setting.
Yeah. I was just gonna get to
time,
that. Do you
place.
think there's a specific place where people get
And
compliments
this all
more?
comes down to
or like,
another,
for example,
yeah.
it's like a club, or maybe it's like a party, maybe you're on a date, or
100% it does. And this
What do you
comes down
think?
to the psychological aspect of it, right? And for instance, let's say I wear that smoky barbecue, whatever it may be, interlude, to the gym. Psychologically, it's not fitting at all. Somebody's going to turn around and be like, what? Like, more than likely, even though it has that head turning factor, in that setting, from a psychological standpoint, it's going to be off. It's just going to be completely off. Now, let's say you
Right.
take that same fragrance and you wear it in a different setting, a cooler weather, where you're going to a prayer or you're going to a, I hate to say it like this, funeral or something like that. Now it's more appropriate. And it's like, wow, I'm in that mode. I'm in that psychological, space. Dude, you smell good. Sorry for your loss. You keep moving. Versus like,
Yeah.
for example, like the fragrance at the gym. Maybe you can have a touch of something sweet. You could potentially wear something that's fresh, right? And that'll more likely psychologically make sense. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most appropriate for you. This really just comes down to personal taste. Now, for instance, let's say I say, you know what, fuck it. I'm still going to wear this. I'm going to wear Ombre Nomad to the gym. That's me being challenging and testy. Now, in order for the psychological aspect, how can I make it as psychologically fitting to wear Ombre Nomad at the gym? So first off, the scent profile in itself doesn't fit. But it can be used in a certain way to still potentially get compliments, but it really depends on the subjection of the person sniffing. But what I can personally do is wear it very mildly so that it's
Yeah.
low in concentration. So that way I can still enjoy it, but the people that are around me could maybe get a whiff, but not feel suffocated by a
Yeah,
fragrance
nothing
that
too
already
crazy.
doesn't fit. Yes. So they'll turn their head and be like, what is that? And then they'll be like, it's smoky. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
not too bad.
and then they
whatever,
might,
and they'll just move on. Yeah.
and they just move on. Now, if I'm wearing it the same amount of times as I would during the wintertime, that's where it's just like, what the fuck, dude?
What are you
Like,
trying to do, man?
like, yeah, or like it's just like out of place. Now, I will say certain fragrances I've worn for the wintertime or winter fragrances I've worn in the summer, and I've gotten more compliments because of the fact that, especially nowadays, and especially after COVID and stuff, interactions and stuff, people are less likely to approach, right? And be like, dude, you smell good, or just in general. But having a head turning factor almost forces them to. And so, for example, let's say I'm walking into the gym and I'm wearing the most appropriate fragrance, but I don't get compliments. Well, that's because it's like, okay, whatever. It's so psychologically fitting. It's just a guy that smells good. He is approachable. He looks good. I would comment. It's just whatever. But let's say I take that same factor, right? And like, let's say 9 out of 10 times I don't get complimented. I get complimented 10 or once out of that 10 times. Now, let's say I walk into the gym, same thing, wearing Ombre Nomad, polarizing, different. It's so different to the point where out of those 10 people, It's going to make much more of an impact on those. It doesn't necessarily negate that it'll do positive or better, but
It
let's
at
say,
least
for
grabs
instance,
attention.
it grabs their attention, and like, let's say 5 out of these 10 people, or 4 out of these 10 people, or even 3 out of these 10 people enjoyed it, but all 3 of them complimented because of the fact that it was like, what is that? And then they determined in that split second, smells nice. Versus the 7 people who said, what is that? And didn't like it and walk away. Sure, I got more compliments, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a better fragrance psychologically. It just had something that forced the people to grab attention. And that's why I personally think that, like, and I love, and why a lot of people eventually get into the spectrum of more polarizing and testy and challenging and unusual scent profiles, because it almost forces people to notice, not necessarily compliment, but notice, right? But that freshie, 10 out of 10 people loved it. And that polarizing oud, 3 out of 10 people loved it. But you got that validity from 3 out of 10. Does it matter whether or not those 7 people out of 10 liked it or disliked it? No, because they didn't say anything anyway. Who gives a fuck? The same thing with the 9 out of 10 people who didn't say anything about your freshie, if your goal is compliments, right? And so it's such a, like, there isn't one perfect way or another, and ultimately you should wear what you like. But these are things to consider, you know, like how and why does it work? And this isn't necessarily like, here's the key to, like, you know, this is how you get the compliments, but it definitely will get you more compliments. There's also another factor as well that I think is important to talk about, is knowing how to wear your fragrance, when to wear your fragrance, how many sprays. These things are a big ass deal. But before we go there, what do you think about that whole psychological fitting, and even when it's not psychologically fitting, that those, generally speaking, or often, more often than not, get compliments when it's not psychologically fitting? Doesn't mean, like, on the grand scheme, there are probably more people that are just like, what is he wearing? But you still get noticed and more compliments.
Yeah,
during
exactly.
those
That's the
times.
point, right? Even if you get
Yes.
attention, even if you get some kind of attention, you might get complimented because maybe
More
someone
likely
likes
to
it.
as well.
Yeah, because
And you will
it
be
at least grabs
remembered.
attention. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that was the guy who wore a smoky fragrance or like a spicy fragrance to the gym. That's the guy. Oh, I
And a
like
lot of
that
those
one.
people,
Maybe you didn't, or like whatever. Yeah.
exactly. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they disliked it. There's some people that just smell it and be like, oh, whatever. But they will never forget
Yeah,
because of
that's
how
true.
unusual you smelled.
Yeah. It all comes down to also grabbing attention. So the whole Omri Numad thing, that's like, it at least, you know,
Yeah.
caught someone's eyes,
Yeah.
nose, so to say, as a
Yeah.
fragrance. But yeah, do you think there are specifically, okay, yeah, coming back to, so as we discussed, there are 2 aspects to getting complimented, right? There's
Yes.
one, the person wearing it, and then the fragrance itself.
And we also said the outside person, subjectivity of that.
Oh, yeah,
Remember
obviously.
the millisecond. So there's 3 segments now, but there's definitely more.
Yeah, obviously. But I want to touch upon the topic of what exactly in fragrance, like, you know, is there a specific kind of, you said freshies, is there anything else that gets more
Yes.
compliments?
I
or
want
like,
to
that
elaborate
works
on
well?
that.
Or like,
Yes.
what do you, people usually say that it's mass appealing. What do you mean mass appealing?
Right. So, yes. So I wanted to also reiterate and talk about, like, unusual fragrance doesn't necessarily negate like a dark or woodsy or smoky fragrance. No. It could be a fragrance with vanilla. It could be a fragrance that's also fresh, but also herbal, you know. And usually what negates something between mass appealing and non-mass appealing is going to be the ease of wearing the fragrance. For instance, when we think fresh, we just think fresh. We don't think anything that's herbal. We don't think anything that's aromatic. While it might have herbs and aromatics, it's all blended to recreate and draw one image of clean, for example. And this, in that sense, makes it less challenging, very easy. I just smell like I came out of the shower. It just all is perfectly blended. So a well-blended, well-composed mush, basically, that just achieves a solid mission of, like, smelling like vanilla, strictly, smelling like shower, strictly, smelling like ginger. These are mass appealing. They're easy to get into. Now, when you have fragrances that are a bit more challenging, these are going to be what they call multifaceted or multidimensional. This is where you start to get fresh fragrances that enhance a couple of aspects that may already be in it. So let's say we take one of those well-blended fragrances, for instance, YSL L'Homme, and we enhance it by adding another note or a very punchy note of something herbal. For instance, YSL L'Homme Le Parfum. Now you've added another aspect that your brain has to focus on as well. That's a lot more concentrated. And actually, when I create my perfumes, I love to take fragrances, or let's say PDM, for example. PDM scent profiles, the reason why they work is because they take something mass appealing, they make it very rich, and then they also focus on one or two aspects of the fragrance that really packs a punch. For instance, let's look at Layton. Layton focuses on this very nice ambery, vanilla, apple style DNA, but they really pack a punch in two aspects. The geranium, which gives it this minty vibe, and then also the vanilla. It gives it this raunchy geranium, rosy, and aromatic that's almost mentholated. If you were to remove those two aspects, you have a very mass appealing fragrance. And some might argue and say that PDM is still pretty mass appealing. Potentially, yes. It's a good entry level. But that's typically what it does. So if we were to take YSL YEDP and we intensified, and this is quite literally what they do with their elixir DNAs, right? And they make it less mass appealing, more niche-esque. Why? Because they make it more rich. They make it more depth and having a bit more dimensions in things that you have to decipher and really focus on. Rather than just being an overall fresh and composed fragrance, I can add more resins that are already there. And now I'm starting to get some kind of piney, balsamic, and richer and denser, maybe even more soapy. And then if I also increased a little bit more of the Divana, I'm also getting something that's more herbal, maybe even kitchen-like, and spices and teas. So now it's no longer just this freshy, but rather something that's also more rich, more ambery, more projecting, but also more herbal. And this is what makes a fragrance, number one, a little bit more, I would say, attention grabbing, because it's something familiar but also unusual. Number two, more towards or less towards the mass appeal. And number three, even more towards the niche. And so when people ask, like, what's mass appealing versus what's, niche? And niche in itself has its own definition. It's not in the way that the fragrance is composed. It's in the way that the brand is. Like, it's a brand that specifically and solely purpose of, fragrance, that would be a niche perfume brand. For example, YSL could never technically be a niche perfume brand because they're a designer. They sell designer bags, etc. But they can create fragrances that smell niche-like. And that's typically speaking why perfume houses why fragrances get a niche category is because the purpose of them is to focus on fragrance and give you those aspects. Whereas designers' focus is to just get you those mass appealing, easy to wear, fresh, get out of the house, get compliments, let's go. But as we start to get further into fragrance, and depending on your journey and where you're smelling fragrances as of today, you're going to start to crave more. And that's kind of where we are as a society nowadays, as a whole, in fragrance today. And we're not talking about just like as of right now, we have more people into fragrance than we've ever had in like the last 10 years. And so you'll start to even see these designer brands start to shift their style into more of a niche-esque DNA. Look at Dolce & Gabbana, for example. They just dropped Pour Homme. It's very polarizing, but you also know there's a lot of people that are saying, give them some time and watch as they actually start to wear it. And they start to sense like, this is unusual. At first, it was like, what the fuck? And it's that split second that's like, wait, what? But because you're the wearer, you have more opportunity to smell it. And you still have to live through it. It's very unusual. But as a person who might smell it right away, they have that split second to determine. I got complimented while wearing that, by the way, by a female at the gym, the Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme. And it's a coffee, patchouli, and lemon pound cake style fragrance. And so that is not a mass appealing scent at all. Because it's like, you're wearing, it's psychologically unusual. You're wearing a coffee? Like, what are you wearing? Coffee? Like, you know what I'm saying? And also on top of that, to add to the psychological effect, I'm at the gym. But everything else is a check. Like, I take care of myself. I look good. I care about what I'm wearing. So I made it easy. And that's what makes a less mass appealing. So yeah, there are ways to make a fresh fragrance attention grabbing. For example, let's say Louis Vuitton's Imagination. This is by Junaid Perfumes. It's called Sanaya. Which, by the way, you guys can pick up at Fragrance Arabia. Use aromatics. You can also pick up my fragrances, aromatics, on Joma Shop. And I have plenty of other discounters and stuff where you can buy fragrances for the low. But this is a fresh fragrance, right? Louis Vuitton Imagination. In its core, as a base, it's a soapy, fresh fragrance. Simply that.
Right.
If we were to take away its polarizing element or its attention grabbing element, we would be left with no tea, right? This is so what I'm basically saying here is that the most polarizing element to this fragrance is going to be tea. And polarizing can then be deciphered as something good or bad. It's that split second. The polarize is what is the attention grabbing, right? But in this sense, the polarize is something very easy to accept. And so the masses will accept it. Why? Because it's black tea. So this is a fresh, soapy fragrance with black tea. And it's an intensive black tea that sticks out like a sore thumb because it's like, wait, I thought it was fresh and soapy, and now you just added tea? Imagine washing your hands with a bar of soap, and then you just like, there's a tea leaf in it. Or like you just brewed up tea. You're washing your hands with a bar of soap while you're actually drinking tea. So it's an unusual psychological combination, but it still smells fresh, it's clean, and it smells good. Because most people, for the masses, tea smells good. Like it reminds you of breakfast. It reminds you of, it has a positive relation. And it's not polarizing in a negative sense, but it's very intense in this one. So if they just had a note of tea, which a lot of freshies do, then okay, cool. I'm not going to say that it's polarizing and attention grabbing. But what's important to note is that the dose of tea in here is very highly concentrated. Like when you smell imagination, you're hit with soap and a shit ton of tea. If they just put a little bit of tea and it was just an accord and it was more blended, then I would say there isn't anything attention grabbing. But because of how intense it is in that tea, it is. And that's what they did. They wanted to really pack a punch in that one aspect into a fragrance that's doing another aspect. So we have completely fresh and soapy, and then all of a sudden you're like, tea. And you're like, wait, what? So that's what it is. And honestly, there are sometimes a lot of notes that'll do that as well. Like, for example, ginger. Ginger is very zingy. It's attention grabbing. And when you use it in any fragrance, it's like, wait, whoa, okay, it's tart. Sometimes apple, depending on what it's combined with. Let's say you combine apple and ginger. That's like double. It's like, holy shit. Like zingy, ginger, attention grabbing, and crisp apple. It's like, oh my God. And then it depends on the finesse. I've smelled fragrances with green apple that are coated in musks. It loses that crisp and punchy. So it really comes down to how punchy those notes are. There are notes that are more likely to get attention as well, like saffron, if you like them. But if you don't like them to begin with, then it's like whatever. And it also depends on the blend, and it also depends on the pack a punch. So if you have ginger in a fragrance, it doesn't mean it's like always going to get compliments, but it's more likely to. And if it's dosed up, then it's even more likely to. And the same thing with other notes like apple, depending on its composition. Now, if it's composed with musks, vanillas, and ambers, it's more likely to be coated by those denser notes, etc. And that's the last aspect of it, which goes into the synthetics, the actual composition of the fragrances, and the last aspect, which is going to be notes. Are there notes that are more compliment worthy? I would argue and say yes. There are certain subjective, realities to that. But I think even from an objective standpoint, and especially relating that objective standpoint to the fact that like attention grabbing can be, I wouldn't say compliment factor then. I would say would give you an attention grabbing factor. So the more you wear attention grabbing factor notes, the more likely you are to get that. Now, whether or not it's positive or negative depends on those other things that we prefaced earlier, like number one, appeal, etc., and the person who is, that split second where they turn around and all that.
The grabbing attention.
Exactly. Finally would be the how to spray and how to wear, bro.
Right. And that's something that we covered in the last episode. How many sprays and what exactly makes the decision of
and
how to wear a
spraying
fragrance and when to wear it and how to wear it, basically.
Yep. Spraying like if you spray something at the same spot 5 times in the same spot, you are actually changing the scent profile, and because each spritz of this, let's say for instance, is 16% alcohol. Now this one spritz was 16% alcohol, for instance. This one is 16. But if I go back here and then on the same spot, I'm piling up 16 over 16%. So it absolutely will be a denser and better performing, but it'll also change the scent profile. And if this was intended for those, let's say, for example, if it has like Lily of the Valley or whatever, for Lily of the Valley to only be concentrated at, say, about 2%, I've now made it into 4%, and the scent profile changes significantly with that. So that makes a difference as well. Also, the more polarizing your fragrance is, I feel the more appropriate you have to be with your sprays. And the appropriation of sprays, as we stated a while ago, depends on the atmosphere, depends on the weather, depends on the psychological.
The setting you're in,
Yeah.
and the
Ombre
person who's
Nomad.
complimenting you.
Exactly. Ombre Nomad. I'd spray it in the wintertime, I'd say about 5 to 6 times. In the summertime, 1 to 2 times. Why? Well, number one, because of the fact that it's psychologically unfitting, but it could still give me compliments and it still smells good. You should never not be able to wear a fragrance you want. Very limited, but unless you're already an undersprayer. And then the other thing is like, psychologically, where am I going? But even if then, you could always tone it down a little bit more. And I would personally never pile it on unless I have a very weak performing fragrance. And I forget what the other thing is that we discussed in regards to all of that stuff. Like
there's notes that are like, that are mass appealing, like that is very subjective and objective. So for example, I feel that's notes like for example, let's say vanilla, right? I'm sure everyone likes the smell of vanilla. That's
but
that
it'd be
everyone's
weird
gonna
to
appreciate.
smell it. Yeah, on the beach.
Right, yeah. But then if I was talking about how a specific note is something that, everyone likes it. You can't go wrong
universally
with it.
accepted, yeah.
Yeah. But then if you put it in a different setting, like you said, on the beach, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it's like a combination of multiple factors that we discussed. It all comes
Too
down
many
to
factors. Yeah, there's no perfect setting. But the best thing that people can do is start with themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
One last thing that I want to ask. Do you think, are designer fragrances more compliment friendly? Or would you say niche fragrances are more compliment friendly?
Friendly designer.
Because they're made that way, or why?
Well, it goes back to, remember that 9 out of 10 people, they are made that way. They are made that way because designers are designing their fragrances to be for the masses, right?
Right.
But it goes back to the 9 out of 10. Like 9 out of 10 people didn't compliment you, but you smelled like a shower. But then 3 out of 10 people complimented you because you smelled like a fucking barbecue. I'm just giving an example. It doesn't mean that more people enjoyed the barbecue over the fresh, but more people were polarized enough to interest them enough to say something about it. See what I'm saying? So it really depends on your goal. Yeah. What are you trying to do? Are you just trying to mass appeal and just be in the masses? That's why it's called mass appeal. Mass appeal does not equal compliments always. It can equal just mass. Like if something smells good, I'm not always going to say, damn, that smells good. But if something smells unusual, I'm almost always going to say, what is that smell? And then if somebody says, I don't know, it's this, then I'll follow up with, it smells like shit, or it smells fucking good. You see what I'm saying? Like right, 9 out of 10 times I'll say that versus the other. Oh, did you use Head and Shoulders today? You know what I mean? Like shampoo today? Hey, did you use shampoo today? Like maybe once upon a time it was unusual for people to smell like a shower in public, but not anymore. And I feel like society is advancing to that. Like perfume is becoming the bare norm for a multitude of society. And I don't think that everybody would like vanilla, but for the masses, I would think they would like vanilla. But it's become
that's something that's not, true.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. So it's yeah, that's it. But there is a lot of, what's fucked up is there's a lot of like grumpy ass people in the world too that'll let out their frustrations in like their life and their world on somebody who gets their attention. Like, for example, if I'm having a bad day, I'll be like, what is that smell? And maybe on a normal day, I'll be like, it's not bad. No, I'm just a grumpy asshole that day. And I'm like, it's fucking annoying.
Yeah.
So also how I felt, like, look at what I just did. So yeah, man, it's not clear cut, but ultimately I feel like, yeah, but ultimately I feel like there is some reality to, there is a science to it, I would personally say. And one of the best and easiest ways is to start with your fucking self. Because there's a lot of people where like, oh, I wore this and I didn't get compliments. Well, bro, like, who are you even around? Is the city you're in like even that type of city? I mean, did you shave? Did you not shave? Like, are you having a bad day? Like, bro, there's so many factors, man. But as a society, And as humans, we do feed off of that type of shit. So anybody who says like a compliment wouldn't make a difference, it's not like biologically true. Like
Yeah.
if somebody
It
compliments
100%
you,
does.
it'll
You don't
1
want to
million
accept it.
percent change.
That's a different thing.
Exactly. You know,
Because,
like it's funny because
everyone
like
wants validation.
the only time where that goes out of the window is like life and death. Where it's like, oh, I don't care about how I smell right now. But even then, like I treated people at the hospital. It's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like somebody who like, it is what it is. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, the art of compliments and how to actually get compliments, you guys, like, don't be a fucking asshole and just clean yourself first. And then start looking at fragrance. Straight up.
It's just an addition to you. It's just a part of you, the fragrance.
Yes.
And then
But notice a trend in
everything-
something. Unusual fragrances typically do better.
Right. The
Or
secret sauce.
punchy fragrances will almost always do better. And you have to spray it enough to be smelled. So if you're wearing imagination, like a fucking 1 to 2 sprays, you might get a compliment. But if you spray it appropriately, which is like 4 to 5 sprays, you'll very likely get more. And it goes back to the origins of perfume. Ta'ala hina. I'm going to smack him back in like in school, bro, with the rulers. Did you cut your nails today, motherfucker? But it goes back to like, you know, even the origins. Like we started with atars, you know. I do want to say this again. We said this on the other podcast. Atars are 100% concentrated oils. And when you take a atar or an attar, right, like this, you're going to take the rod, you're going to dab, 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 and then maybe go. Each swipe was 100%, right? And we said that this was 14%. 14, 14, 14. Even then, if we want to argue and say the origins and the actual way to wear fragrance, we haven't even equaled one slab. The one thing I will argue and say for this is that this composed with alcohol does increase diffusion, more projection. And so that one dab might not behave as strong as just these 2 sprays, despite the fact that it was only 28% and that was 100%. But still, I've never seen a creator of their own perfumes, and we're talking big brands, use their own fragrance, even Dolce & Gabbana, for example, their perfumers, less than like 4 sprays. Ever. Just doesn't make sense. 100%. And let's say, what are you going to tell, like a parfum? Like, or whatever, let's say 20%. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. 4 to 5 sprays is like a minimum. 5 sprays to me is a minimum. I go generally speaking 6 to 8. But there are certain fragrances where it's like, dude, don't do more than 4. But it really depends if it's an extrait. So I would personally say it depends on the concentration, and it also depends on the volatility of the notes, etc. And if you guys want more details, I highly recommend you go and check out that last podcast that we did, talking about volatility, talking about projection, how they project, and why they project, and what notes do and don't, because that's a whole nother topic that's very, very extensive as to all
And it
of
was
that.
fun.
Yeah, man.
And there's a lot to it. There's
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah, that was a
things
good
to
one,
be-
actually.
Yeah. And
I just wanted to clear the
coming
air,
back
man,
to-
because like a lot of people are like, I don't get compliments. Or this guy always says he got, well, because like, that's how to get it, bro. Like,
yeah, it's
you
not
could
just
argue,
the
like-
fragrance, dude.
yeah. And I'm not saying anything that's like specific to me. Like, this is the reality of it. It's like biological. Like, look
Yeah.
into the laws of attraction or science of attraction. Look into all that stuff and then assess why you're not getting compliments, bro. Crazy to me. Yeah.
Summarizing
man.
everything that we've talked about, it's just not your fragrance, dude. It's a lot more to it.
Nah, fuck no. It's not just your fragrance. It's not just your fragrance.
And
but
the
there
day you
are,
accept it, it's gonna get better for you.
Yeah. And that's why for me personally, just psychologically, like subconsciously, I've grown to love unusual fragrances. Because the overall experience is just something else. It's a conversation starter. It's more compliment, it's more head turning and potentially, well, in that sense, I guess it would be more compliment. It'll be more compliment getting. Maybe not worthy, but it'll be more compliment getting. It's a more memorable wear. It's a more memorable experience because of how unusual it is. You're going to remember how unusual it is. People will remember you for how unusual it was. just overall a funner and better experience. It really just depends on what the fuck these, who you and what you are into this for. Like, what are you into this for, bro? If you want to just get compliments while smelling safe, then keep getting that 1 out of 10. You still smell good. You still smell good. If you can't get into challenging or testy, then get over it. Get over it. That's it. I got plenty of compliments with basic fragrances like YEDP, but like maybe once a week because it's so normal, you know? But it is a good fragrance, by the way. YEDP, every man should have that for the daily dumb reach, you know? And yeah, and the other thing that I think is a pretty interesting topic that I want to talk to you about in the next podcast or so is how many fragrances should you actually have in your collection, bro? I feel like a lot of people are getting fucking crazy with the new generation of like fragrance. And it doesn't help that like every week we have a new release. It seems almost every week, dude. Like Stronger With You Parfum just came out, and then Stronger With You Sandalwood just announced. Is that not crazy?
It is. Yeah. And for example, I think the next episode we could talk about what are the scent profiles that you absolutely need. You don't have to have every fragrance ever.
Nah.
But like, what are the scent profiles?
I think there are some essentials
need to have. Yeah.
Yeah. Essential scent profiles, you know. And honestly, if we narrowed it into that, it would only serve those mass appealing categories. Honestly. Well, actually, no. Let's save that for the podcast because I don't think so. And I think I'd like to expand a little bit more on that because, like I said, you don't have to have fresh that's only in one direction. You can have fresh and punchy, right? Whether or not you like it, it's going to be a little bit more work on you to find what you like in that realm because whatever it is that it's concentrated in or punchy, you have to like. But it can be like accepted as good, just maybe not what you like. That's it. So yeah, man, I think I'd like to wrap it up like that. And I guess you guys will be talking about the next few, maybe something even unrelated to these fragrances and shit, and just fucking lifestyle and like how to pick up chicks or something.
Right, yeah.
I didn't say that, but anyway. But yeah, man, thank you guys so much for watching. Rishi, is there anything else you want to add to that, or like your final like thoughts on this whole thing? Like, what do you think about people?
Not really. Like, I mean, this is once again all of these episodes after this conversation, I'm just stuck with a shit ton of information, and then I process it, and then I understand, okay, this is how it is, this is how it is, this is how it's going to be. And I'm sure this is going to be the same thing for the people listening, because like you might think that it's just one thing, that you might think that things are always simple, but it's
like, way more.
It's way more.
I don't want to say complicated, but it's complex. These are the thoughts that I'm pretty sure people could eventually get into with research, with study, and also with enough dissection, which I've already I've done for years. I've looked into all of these psychological aspects. I had to. I studied. I'm in medicine, and it's funny how like things that we learn that we think are so unusable. And it's true, there's a lot that we do, like statistics and stuff. Eventually we use it in certain aspects of life. Like there's a lot of like math that I learned in college that taught me, logic or, things like that. Like how to achieve certain ways or certain results in different ways. For example, using this formula can give you this answer, and just thinking outside of the box to potentially achieve the same results, etc. And it goes on and on. So yeah, man, there's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to it, but it depends on how interested you are and how much a fuck you give.
Yeah, golden words.
Yeah, and believe it or not, dude, believe it or not, there are people that, and there is no judging. There are people that don't know. Hey, this is foreign to them. I grew up with fragrance. I grew up my entire life with fragrance, and so I have my entire life's experience as well, and creating fragrance experience as well in all of these topics. And I studied this. Like, this is something that I love. Like, I've been reviewing fragrances. This is an aspect I've reviewed and studied for the last 4 years, even prior to reviewing. It's something I hyper focus on because I love this shit. So sharing that with you guys, even to those who had no clue. And for those of you who are watching and this is some of this is obvious, some of it might not be, but believe it or not, even a lot of this isn't obvious, right? And there's no problem with that. But knowledge is power. And I'm always willing to learn. I'm always learning myself. And I love to come back and share. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for watching.
That's the goal of this.
Yes, that's the goal of this. This was episode, I don't even know, number whatever.
I think
The
this is episode 3.
key, I don't think it's a secret key, but the key to unlocking the most desirable compliments while wearing your fragrance. My name's Neeb. This is Rishi, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.